It's Friday, Feedback Friday, the feedbackiest day of the week. Gotta love the song, right? Gotta love the song. Well, it was a tumultuous week for various reasons. Lost a couple of major celebrities, had some more personal issues. I've been asked by a lot of people not to talk further about the more personal stuff, and I'm going to respect that for various reasons, but mostly because I do listen to what you guys want to hear about. And I found that in situations like that, it's best to just say my piece once and move on. Belaboring it just gives people the attention they're seeking. It draws people into the muck. It creates negativity and sadness and all that stuff, and we don't want to do that. But I do have a happier announcement to make, which is I've found a workaround for that persistent audio problem. It didn't involve fixing the software. It involved recording in a completely different software. But what I've taken to doing is just doing a completely separate audio file that I record at the same time as the visuals, smoosh it together in Adobe Premiere, and put it out that way. And it eliminates the bumps and the hiccups and the sync issues. I think I may need an actual audio card, like a sound card for my computer. I think my computer is just not handling sound as well as it handles video right now, hence the sound issues, because it's I guess the capture software resets every so often to sync the audio and video, so there isn't an exceptional amount of lag, and that seems to be what was going on. In other news, I wanted to address something that happened on Twitter. I don't remember if I actually did a video about the things that happened in Germany on New Year's Eve, but I've been talking a lot about it on Twitter. And some people sort of threw down the gauntlet to me when I was arguing, let's wait. Let's get all the facts. Let's collect data first, draw conclusions second. And I wanted to respond to that because it is a compromise when someone is coming at you with a theory and you're going, no, wait, we don't know that for sure. And I will admit a bit of a mea culpa on my part. I had no idea about the sensitivities in Europe regarding immigration and migrants and all that stuff. I live in Canada and I live specifically in Toronto, or as the rest of the world pronounces it, Toronto. Those of you who've seen Argo know we slur the T. We do that. We drop consonants like crazy in Canada. I don't quite know what that's connected to, but we do say Toronto as if there's no second T. But, we, I guess, take for granted the way that Canada manages to take in a fairly large number of people from other places and still maintain a Canadian identity. And I don't intend at all to compare Canada's taking in migrants to what's going on in Europe right now. The issue with Europe is that the entire processing system collapsed. Certain points of entry, instead of doing what they were supposed to do and processing people at point of entry, they just gave people freedom of movement, which means a whole bunch of people spread out all over Europe, and people had to do a ton of catching up. And it's led to, what some people will refer to as a refugee crisis, what some people will refer to as a migrant crisis. And it's very important to distinguish between a refugee and a migrant. A refugee is somebody fleeing either war or political persecution. And there's an entire process you have to make and go through to make a successful refugee claim. Whereas a migrant is just somebody moving from one place to another place. And this becomes very important when dealing with what's going on in Europe right now, the various issues related to immigration and culture and criminality and all these things. So when I originally, well, not originally, but I tweeted an article that I felt drew too much of a parallel between the crime that happened in Cologne on New Year's Eve. And no one is denying those crimes happened. Like, that's insane. They happened. But I felt like people were too quick to jump to connect that crime to what's going on in, the people we are fighting in the Middle East. Things like ISIS or ISIL or whatever you want to call them, IS, Islamic State. Islamic fundamentalism, what some people refer to as Islamic terrorism. I felt there was too quick of a jump to that. And so I tweeted something and pointed out that, devout Muslims don't drink. And I took a lot of crap for that. And, the funny thing is I wasn't saying that I don't know any Muslims who consume alcohol. Of course I do. But they also tend to eat bacon and do a lot of other things that Islam tells you not to do. I mean, people have various levels of orthodoxy. The point I was trying to make is you can't say someone is a fundamentalist Muslim and a lax Muslim at the same time. And that point was missed in people's intense anger. And I understand that people look for someone to blame so that people can feel like everything's under control. But part of being a person who is intellectually driven is to stop that cognitively, to stop that gut reaction to look around for someone to blame and to wait and to see what comes of the investigation. I think it was I don't remember. It was like 3 or 5 days. There was a 3 or 5 day gap in reporting between the initial assaults and robberies and sexual assaults and all those things to the actual reporting of the story. And I just want to be clear, I disagree with that. I think that if there is a safety issue, if there are things going on, people have the right to know that there have been a series of crimes in a particular area. I don't know why reporting on the race of the people who did it had anything to do with reporting the issue at all. If there's an area of the city that's temporarily unsafe for women or anyone, people should know. Just based on the way that this issue has divided the left. And I've seen otherwise moderate people calling out people left and right for comments and going to absolutely crazy extremes on this thing. And people are, I think, in a lot of camps forgetting that at the end, at the root of this is the reality that people, predominantly women, were the victims of crimes in a public place committed by criminals, and there was inadequate policing to prevent this. And that's the core. And I say this as somebody who, you guys know the neighborhood I grew up in. You knew it wasn't that great. And this land has become more desirable to higher class people. So what's happening is something they're calling the water balloon effect. You push down a water balloon and it squishes out to the sides. Well, what's happening is that populations are migrating outside the areas with adequate social services. And so the neighborhoods, the communities on the outskirts of that water balloon effect where the problems are being pushed out, they're not able to deal with them as effectively as they could in my old neighborhood because the services aren't set up. And it's the same thing that's happening in Europe right now. You're seeing crimes related to poverty, but people are taking these crimes related to poverty and making them about race. And that's a big red flag for me. Now, getting back to that sort of gauntlet being thrown down, quite a few people challenge me, will I admit when the evidence comes out that it is, men of Arab and North African descent? Will I admit they're refugees, or as people are disgustingly calling them, rape-fugees? And I will say, yes, the evidence indicates that these are men of, it seems, more and more predominantly North African backgrounds. It seems that they are, in fact, migrants. I won't go as far as to call them refugees. And this is an important distinction for me because, again, it's about crime and poverty versus race. And this is exceptionally important because if it was about race, it would be a unique problem, right? You'd see things in among these races that you wouldn't see in other poor communities. And the thing is there a different coat of paint on this? Absolutely. But things like the abysmal treatment of women in impoverished communities is exceptionally well documented. When you get poverty, you get a lot of these things we're seeing in Germany right now, and Finland and Sweden and a lot of countries across Europe. And there's been a lot of interesting things written. Guys, don't get ahead of yourselves yet, please. I'm unpacking this slowly. There's been a lot of interesting things written about the fact that they're zeroing in on some Moroccan gangs in this that have not only been preying on, we'll say white women or ethnically German women and Finnish women and Swedish women, but they've apparently also been robbing actual legitimate refugees to pay for their criminal behavior as well. And there's been a bunch of articles of late. You'll see one here. I pulled the Daily Mail because it's the most recognizable source, not necessarily the best source. I've found this. People have forwarded me, Caribbean websites and things like that have covered this as well. And there's a huge difference. There's a huge difference in the statistics of criminality between people coming from Syria and Iraq and places like that, and people coming from places like Morocco and Egypt and places like that. And this is why it's very important not to generalize all Arabic people by the actions of some Arabic people. The histories of the various countries are exceptionally different. For some odd reason, there's this desire to lump all Muslims together, and it's just not so. And now that being said, and the reality being that we certainly seem to have an issue here with a criminal element exploiting the legitimate refugees and the migrant crisis for their own gains. And this is connected to the absolute hash the various European governments and the European Union as a whole made of this migrant crisis. And these details do not necessarily keep anyone walking the streets of Germany or Finland or Sweden safe in the short term. But in the long term, actually fixing the problem is dependent on correctly identifying the problem. And that's where I want to move into the stuff that has really divided the left. Because there's now a war, because I don't know if you guys know that it's trendy to back any Muslim or Arab cause on the left. And that's reductive and it's foolish and it's what people are referring to as the regressive left. But now we're getting the idea of regressivism on the left thrown around whenever there's a disagreement. So right now we've got feminists saying, well, you guys only care about, public rapes of women when the attacker is allegedly brown, or I think we can say with certainty they were brown. Now they were of, I'll use the stump, Arab or North African descent. And then the other side is saying that you're saying we can never criticize Muslims or Arabs or their culture. And I think this is a ridiculous binary. It's a ridiculous knee-jerk. I have not seen anyone well, that's not true, no one. There are some crackpots out there who have been saying exactly that. You can't criticize Muslims, or you can't, people don't care about rape when white men do it. But the people I've seen criticized on this, they didn't go that far. They didn't say you can never criticize Muslims. They're saying this is it. The innocent until proven guilty sort of stump speech becomes much more important to certain people on the left when the perpetrator is not white, or the accused is not white. And that's just sort of what certain, and it was a bit of a knee jerk, but I'm not going to criticize him too heavily, because I get that this is like, oh my God, the enormity of what happened in Cologne, Germany on New Year's Eve, I think is undeniable. But, what these feminists were saying, and like I said, I'm not saying I completely agree with them, but it is something to consider that this stuff happens all the time. It's only become a big scandal because it was brown people. Now, I think it became a big scandal because it was held back for multiple days, not necessarily because it's brown people, but then they covered it up because, and they're right, they should not be covering up attacks like this, no matter what. Don't report the race of the people, fine, but don't cover it up completely, right? But then this, you can never criticize Islam, it's wrong, they're under siege, all that stuff. That's going too far as well. And I know there are people that de facto are basically making this argument without realizing they're making this argument. And that's unfortunate because they really don't see their own bias. But I think the vast majority of moderate leftists are saying, we absolutely agree that there are obviously issues in these cultures, in the Middle East and North Africa. That's undeniable, right? That's absolutely undeniable. The problem, and now I'm sort of putting on my quasi-academic hat for a moment, and saying the problem is we don't know if religion is actually the root cause of these problems, or if it's something else like poverty or a lack of personal agency due to government oppression, or, numerous other factors. There can be cultural factors beyond religion, tribal superstition, stuff like that. And some people would say that is a belief system, that is a worldview, but those differ radically from Egypt to Morocco to Iraq to Iran to Syria to Lebanon to on and on and on. And it's exceptionally important not to generalize to the point that you go chasing a group of people with, torches and pitchforks, when the reality is that the vast majority of these people are being... they're at the mercy of these systems that they don't agree with either. And I think it's really important to remember that, the statistic in the article is that, a tiny, tiny portion of Syrian migrants to Europe have actually been anything in connection to a crime. 0.5%. Whereas 40% of people from other places, notably North Africa, I believe Morocco was the one they zeroed in, have been an issue. And it's important. So if people want to say it's Moroccan migrants, I'm perfectly fine with that at this point. Although there was one American among the suspects the Cologne police were after. So but if you want to say it, there is an issue with migrant criminals from Morocco, I'm good with saying that right now. I will not say it is the Muslim refugees or the Syrian refugees. There's no evidence to conclude that it is everyone. And those of you who have followed what's going on in gaming right now for the last couple years know how dangerous generalizations can be. But then it's the whole thing of, are we not allowed to have a discussion of the problems in the Arab world, in the North African world, all across the African subcontinent, to be quite honest. No, we can have discussions about that. I don't know that, again, it makes any sense to generalize what's going on across, the quote unquote Muslim world as a big blanket statement, because the treatment of women in Syria, for instance, is quite oppressive. In Saudi Arabia, it's a problem, but it's a very different kind of thing than the issues going on in, say, Egypt. And every single one of those areas needs to be looked at, because the problem with jumping to conclusions, say, oh, we have this problem in the quote unquote Arab world, we're going to create a solution for the Arab world. Well, then we get a repeat of tackling poverty in Africa, with people treating Africa, the continent, like it's a single country. It didn't work for years and years and years and years. And what's finally gotten that problem with any sort of movement on that problem, and it's going to take 3 generations to make headway on it, which is probably what's going to have to happen for these other countries too. It's going to have to take 3 generations for it to really, really come up to where we want it to be. But there's a roadmap, right? But that only started happening when local activists and local organizers and local educators were empowered to address the specific issues in their specific communities and not get caught under this massive blanket mandate that was mostly throwing money at corrupt governments that was just disappearing and never getting to the people. And so I think it's important we don't make the same mistake here. And there's a real need for leadership, not just in government with this European issue, but among the people discussing this issue, among the left, and, among the right too. I hope that moderate right-wingers don't feel like they have absolutely no voice in this thing with, the shrieking that's been going on. I think it's important to remember that the right is not unified in a blame the brown people approach. But I think it's important to actually get solutions that work. And that means not jumping to conclusions, not taking the easy assumption, and not taking the easy out. Now, that's really hard. That's not very emotionally validating at all. It's not quick. It's not simple. It's not clean, right? It's messy and it's complicated and it's hard to get your head around it. It's hard to explain. But in the long term, it is exceptionally more worthwhile. And what I don't want to see happen is these people who legitimately fled a, horrendous war-torn area in Syria, and these people number in the millions, to be further put at the mercy of these criminals who number, they estimate it's about 1,000 people. they say predominantly migrant men, they become more at the mercy of these criminals, these 1,000 criminals preying on millions of innocent people. And if we lump them in with these criminals, we're giving the criminals free rein to just rob these people more and harass these people more and terrorize these people more and push these people further to the margins of society. And so they're still in a war. I mean, what's the difference if you're terrorized by a government or you're terrorized by a gang? You're still living in terror. And ultimately, at the end of the day, yes, we want to keep the pre-existing population of Europe safe. Yes, we absolutely do. And I understand that if you're, you know, what do they call them? Core German? That sounds the same as old stock Canadian to me. But, you know, if you're somebody who's lived in Germany or Switzerland or Finland all your life, and, you know, I've been to Finland, it's a beautiful place. I understand that your primary concern is for you, your friends, your family. You want to keep them safe primarily, and that's a completely human urge and totally understandable. It's just important to remember, and I say this as somebody who has not only studied poverty and marginalization, but as someone who grew up in it. We're all safer if we keep marginalized communities as minimally marginalized as possible. It benefits everyone if the marginalized people are brought more into the system, closer to the system, that they become less of a them and more of an us, because the more these 1,000 criminals are able to prey on a million refugees, these people don't have help. The more these people can't join society because of prejudice, those numbers of criminals are going to grow because people are either the aggressor or the person being picked on. And that's what you see in ghettos. That's what you see in poor countries. People, I mean, look at El Chapo. He grew drugs because that's how you make money. It wasn't a particular love of drugs. It wasn't a particular love of crime. It was a love of a better lifestyle. And I think that's something we can all relate to. If you eliminate choices for people, they work with the choices they have. And so I wanted to make this video because I wanted to keep my word to these people and say, yes, I would admit it if there was an Arab or North African connection. There is. I just also wanted to make it clear that it is a more difficult problem than throw all the refugees out. What signal does that send to them? What signal does it send to a person about the West that they don't agree with the criminals, with their governments, which might as well be in some cases criminals as well? They don't agree with them. They want to get away from them. And when they came asking for help, they had the door slammed in their face because of bad things other people did who happened to look like them. And for the people listening to this channel, you're gamers, you know how that feels. You're geeks, you know how that feels. You know what it's like to have the door slammed in your face because of negative reputations, of stigma, of being not like the people with power. And so I'm asking people to focus on the criminals, to focus on rooting out that criminal element. And guess what? You can't do that if the other people who look like those criminals won't talk to you because they don't trust secular governments and they don't trust the police. And so this is a really critical moment. Like, trust me, you don't want ghettos in Germany. You don't want them, like the massive sweeping ghettos that they have in places like Chicago and Los Angeles. Those are ghettos like I haven't even seen. I mean, I grew up in poverty. I grew up in a rough neighborhood, but it's nothing like Southside, and it's nothing like East LA or anything like that. The problem with those ghettos is they are geographically massive. And the cops don't go there, taxis don't go there, ambulances don't go there, home care doesn't go there. This is marginalization, guys, and we don't want that. So I hope you found this informative. I hope you found it nuanced. I'm asking you to please not knee-jerk because this is important. But I hope I clarified, and I hope I sort of stuck to what I said I'd do, because that's important to me. It's important to me that you guys trust that I will honor the guarantees that I give you. And so I wanted to clarify, and I wanted, to honor that. But still do it in a way that people can't run off and say, see, no. It's complicated. It's complicated, and it's going to take time, and I just hope that, the powers that be in these situations get their heads out of their asses, stop yelling at each other, stop pointing fingers, and actually solve the problem. Because this is going to take cooperation and leadership, and not everybody screaming at everybody else and everybody blaming everybody else. This is a human problem. It's going to take a human solution, and dehumanizing people solves nothing. So have a good weekend, everybody. Try not to step in too much drama, and I'll be back next week.